there is so much more beyond knowing and doing. There is a technological framework that I need to know. There is capabilities that I have to build. The science of learning, the science of how do you create content, the science of how do you facilitate learning. All these are different domains and expertise by itself. If you look at instructional design, that itself a huge piece. If you're looking at delivery and various different methods of delivery, they are so very different. So while I'm going to present and talk to you about how each of the pieces are going to come together, you might have to wear different hats. And as in when I go through this topics, I would suggest that this is the hat that you'll have to wear, and that would make it easier for you to understand, and it will facilitate me to help you understand a little more. Hope that's okay. In the meantime, if there is anything, Smita, if the voice is audible, if there is any challenges, would want you to keep me posted. Hope.
Absolutely, Shikhar. As of now, you're very clear.
Okay, great. So moving forward, I would want you again reiterating that you'll have to switch hats. Stay with me. So performance of a learner essentially is ability, motivation, opportunity, and interference. Potential is essentially a person's complete uh, ability to perform. It's humongous and it is infinite. So I'm not spending time on potential, but largely I'm going to define ability, motivation, opportunity. While all of you would know all this, I'm just putting this on the table. So what I'm saying is in sync with what you also understand. So ability essentially is a person's innate um, characteristics which he naturally has as he's born or he's living through. And skill is something that we develop by practice. We essentially put knowledge into work, and we see that we can create something out of our natural and innate capabilities. And when the skill becomes consistent and we are able to do it consistently, we call it competence. However, to do consistently, you need other skills to come together. So these three components are in many times used interchangeably, and that's the reason why I'm trying to put this as all in different segments and making it clear. So skill is to just with an example, to be able to run is what is the able capability that we are born with or we have. To run exceptionally well or to run well is something we with our energies, with our willingness, we put into it. Now when it comes to competency, I'm taking dribbling in a football game. You might be running there, but you also have other skills uh, adding up there to exhibit this competency. So generally competency is a combination of skills, or certain times it's uh, a single skill, but largely it's a combination of multiple skills. So when a person is able, he acquires knowledge, and once he's acquired knowledge, he is now in a state to put it into practice. And when he puts this into practice, he's able to perform. But performing at the peak happens when value internalization happens, which means I love the job and I love to create outcome out of it. So essentially, peak performance happens when the person is performing and he's part of the act, is not outside. So all these three happens for a person to reach peak performance. This is definition of ability. When we say performance is ability into whatever, ability is defined as a person's competency to perform it at the peak level. Yeah. So motivation. Motivation has two components, intrinsic and eccentric. Most of you would be aware of it. I'm just trying to capture few of the components here. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose is intrinsically driving us. Eccentric motivation is compensation, punishment, and reward. That's there. So if there is the right amount of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, our ability to perform will improve. Now, opportunity, as I mentioned in the initial stage, whenever it comes to organizational culture, I'm not going to spend much time. Opportunity is something that the organization culture has to do. However, I'm just highlighting here. Um, when organization connect the passion of the person with the vision of the organization, it works. There are a lot of organization which does this. I would stay away from picking up any organization, naming them, but there are a lot of organization which does this. And of course there are some organizations which don't do it, but if it is done, the performance of the people are much superior. Empower them to succeed, invest in their well-being. These are two other components which organization has to develop for them to perform. The third component of inference largely comes from the fact that at one layer, we are relating with the outside world. When I'm relating with the outside world and making things happen in the outside world, I learn some things, I practice it, I perform in the outer world. However, there are thoughts, beliefs, and views that I have, which limits my performance, which I myself am limiting. Sorry. So these are aspects about ourselves which limits our performance, and performance is largely dependent on eliminating this limitations that we have built for ourselves over a period of time. So this I'm using the statement from Timothy Galway from the Inner Game book, and he's been one of the biggest proponent of coaching. He says our outer game, while we do it whichever way we want to, we manipulate it. Uh, our outer game or outer effectiveness is limited by the inner uh, conversations that we have, which largely stems around fear, self-doubt, and limiting concepts and assumptions. Largely belief. Few of the beliefs that I can say is, most of the people say rich people cannot be happy. These are stories that at least I grew up in the 1980s. Um, I am short tempered. I cannot complete it. I cannot complete anything that I start. I'm a good starter. I don't finish. Those are some of the limitations that we set for ourselves. So this, how do we overcome this? I'm going to talk about the L&D and the training part, how we should co-create in the future slides. So essentially the journey of the learner, I've made it in three colors. One is when he has the uh, capability, he acquires knowledge, he goes through the component. I would want you to look at action by learner, that particular column. He acquires knowledge, he practices under guidance. Deliberate practice is feedback, correction, and is willing to go through correction and starts performing without guidance and correction. He reaches almost an expert level. Mastery is pending, and the mastery value internalization happens when somebody coaches him or mentors him. So this is largely the journey of the learner. Smita, at this point of time, any questions or any inputs from the participants?
No, there aren't any questions yet, Shekhar. I'm sure they will come as we move along.
All right. Okay. So now we have seen the learner journey. I want you to look at how or what we have done as training and L&D team. I'll tell you why I have coined both trainer and L&D. I could have just put a trainer, training, or L&D. I'll explain why I'm doing that. when you look at co-creating any performance for a learner, there are two components. One is the content and one is the delivery piece. These are the same parts of, or two sides of the same coin. Uh, and we will also look at the whole journey of how the training and L&D fraternity has moved from 1950s onwards till now. This segment don't hold me for the years because I don't have any data or research on the years, but just for all of us to cognitively follow what has happened and how things have evolved, I want you to look during the periods of 1950 to 1990, or rather 1985. I think that I should change it to 1985. 1985 to 2005 and 2000 to 2020. In the first stage, after the World War II period till 1980, uh, learning and development, there was no learning and development per se at that point of time. It was only training was a very strategic tool then, and very effective. In the 1985s, things changed, and training and L&D started looking for relevance, and we are still continuing it, however, with the help of technology. And what is going to happen, or what I foresee after 2020, is resurgence of L&D and training as the strategic tool. I'll explain more about this as we go into
Shekhar,
slides.
I'm sorry, Shekhar, I'm sorry to disturb you.
Yeah.
So there's a question by Sangram who wants you to repeat whatever you said about learner's journey, the previous slide.
Oh, okay.
So can you just go back a little there?
Yeah. So learning stages, it's okay.
Sangram, Sangram, do you have anything in particular to ask here, or do you want it to be repeated? Okay, Shekhar, please go ahead.
Okay, so just follow the column under action by learner. So essentially, when a person is capable and he's willing, he acquires knowledge. And once he acquires knowledge, it's still in the cognitive stage, what I call as mind muscle. And one of the things that I usually say is things have to move from mind memory to muscle memory. Muscle memory happens in practice, deliberate practice, and performance. Yeah. And once muscle memory happens, it has to internalize at your own level, at which you are one with whatever you're doing. For example, I would state what Michael Jackson said about his dancing. He said, "I will never be able to dance as a process. However, you start learning dance by process only, step 1, 2, 3, 4. But then after a stage, you go with the rhythm of the song and you dance." So I completely align with his statement, because till a stage you're performing to the capability of 60, 70, 80%, you are watching yourself. But then at some stage, when you are with that, whatever you're performing, it becomes mastery, it becomes art, and that's when you become the performance itself. So essentially, the journey starts from knowledge acquisition, moving to skill, and then being the performance at its peak. Yeah. Hope that answers Sangram's question. And if there is anything, we'll pick it up as we go through the Q&A session. And so I was saying, in the last phase, it's going to be beyond 2020. We are going to come back. I mean, it's not a forecasting or a projection. I mean, forecasting or astrological based kind of a thing. Since technology has taken over, we have seen a lot of things happening. We always were limited by the organizational culture. However, in the last slide, I'll address the question of how things will emerge in the future. So all of us know this, but I just want to highlight, content essentially hasn't changed much in the last 70 years. Benjamin Bloom was given the role of creating a taxonomy for education, and he did this in 1956. And revision happened in 2001. And the revision also was nothing major. There was slight alteration, redefinition of the competencies which we have categorized, and so content still is going to be created, developed in the same way it goes. Instructional design will be part of the future L&D needs. However, it needs to be more crisp, shorter, and quick. And the method of building it is going to change with technology. However, the premise on what content I'm doing for what, I think in the next two slides, as we discuss, I'll also share how content gets distributed over a period of segments. So training delivery per se started with classroom, then activity based. So if you look at initially, so let's look at any army or organization. I mean, Al Qaeda would be a bad organization, but look at learning per se. Initially, they address the cognitive piece, then they get into the physical piece of how and effectively you can prepare yourself, and then the psychological aspect happens. Even today, armies across the world and organizations, again, many organizations have the practice of going through the entire piece to ensure that people perform. Some of the organizations, of course, for the lack of time, energy, money, and they don't see relevance or value, they cut short and operate only on cognitive levels. So those organizations will have only classroom, but anyway, that is also changing. We moved from classroom to activity based, which was more physical oriented, which means we were getting involved in it. Outbound gave a little more depth to my experience of a behavior or a thought, and simulation was a combination of both. Simulation in classroom happens with both creating a framework for how do I think, how do I exhibit the behavior or competence in a given situation. Now simulations are also available on online. Then from on simulation, there has been virtual learning. Virtual learning has many avatars, and the present one is virtual reality and artificial reality. Both of this are used in some forms, but has not evolved to a level that we can really train. Some of the examples in VR and AR is I mean, to train people on tractor, it's a very difficult thing. So VR and AR is used by one of the leading equipment manufacturers, I mean, farm equipment manufacturers in India, to train people on riding or driving the farm equipment. So we are there. We have not reached the peak in AR VR, but it's going to be inclusive, and it will become one of the mainstays of learning. So now I had given the learning process on one side, and now you have learning methodology and culture on the other side. Now what I would again want you to look at is actions by the learner and learning methodology. So during learning acquisition, largely classroom, online, any kind of thing, even now what I'm doing is going to be only knowledge acquisition. How much knowledge acquisition happens is again a question, but however, knowledge acquisition can happen on a classroom, online, so on and so forth. And if I expect any one of you to go out and apply whatever I've taught to you, it 1 in a million chance is not going to happen. Very, very rare chances that somebody goes through a training program, which is download, which is an awareness program, and go out and perform. Very, very rare chance. And that to incorporate, not happening. I'll tell you one of the reasons why it won't happen in the next slide. The second part, while people go through practice. For practice, what is needed is on the job coaching, shadowing, and cross functional exposure. And deliberate practice performance coaching is required, which is missing in most of the organization, for lack of performance coach itself. Not the coach is ready, the performance coaches is not ready. When they are performing, to stand away and just let them perform and mentor them is one of the aspect. And value internalization largely is coaching, which essentially means how do I remove my blocks internally. So the journeys have to be consistent and parallel. So I just tried to put in data here to help you to understand how mind, um, heart, and action are connected. See, when you do a classroom program, it's high on cognitive, very low on affective or connecting to the learning, and physically it is very limited. Even if you do a role play, assisted role play, this is the best you can do. Anything that you do on outbound program, activities based program, your conceptual learning will come down. However, your physical learning will go up a little better than affective learning is a little better. In simulation, heuristic, and performance coaching and coaching, your level of concepts and your psychomotor skills or how to apply becomes better, and effectiveness increases. However, mentoring and technology can produce a complete uh, parallel journey, uh, and help the learner learn in his own time, in his own pace. When I say own time, own pace, um, I'll address it in the second part of the statement here, between 85 to 2000. I'll tell you why. So in the 1950s to 1990, it was like people were sure about what is the capability the person has got, ability has got, and then they put him into a program. So they trained him, and there was a part of coaching practice, and then he went into the job. So he performed well. At that point of time, business was slow or moderate paced. There was no hurry. There was enough time for training to uh, influence and get the results. So this was, I think, the golden period. This data I put here based on my conversations and my understanding from senior trainers from the industry across the world. With the technology improving, we were at the crossroads where organization had to increase pace. There were no enough capability in the people who learned. So the set of people or the target segment that we were training changed to huge segment of people. To just give you an example, you had ITA students, you had engineering students, and you had ITI, all of them together in one batch, and you had to train them. And you're training whatever instructional design you're doing, you're moderating it for a particular segment, and you lose out on the other people. And that's why between 1985 to 2000, and even after 2000, we were trying to catch up with business and saying that we are relevant, and that's not been happening. At least in these two stages, I was not part of it, but post 2000, I've been part of the relevance creation, and at the strategic level, how we struggle to create relevance. Um, with technology, I think we saw that there was a scope, there was a chance for us to build great learning journeys for the learners. So I'm sure that going forward, we will build great learning journeys along with the learners. Now, here with technology coming in, I'll go back to the last point where I was trying to say, with technology, we should be able to extremely uh, present extremely good content or learning journeys for our learners. So technology came in and changed quite a lot of things. I want you to look at only this box where I have highlighted in black. In the 1995, we have CBT, CD based learning. We were able to browse. We then, as technology improved, search was possible, tweet was possible, videos was possible. We were able to share, community sharing happened, peer learning happened, and we are at a stage where we can use multiple components. So to help you understand this, the lower part of the slide will help you. Delivery methods before pre-technology was segmented into cognitive, um, psychomotor, and affective. They were parts which were done separately. But with technology coming in, everything is now integrated, and it is like real life. I go from cognitively understanding, applying, and come back to cognitive or going to affective, and I can go randomly in between as I like as a learner. So this kind of learning with technology is a perfect way of helping learners learn. Having said that, I also want you to understand how learning has changed over a period of 1995 or 1998 to 2020. Both the slides come from Josh Bersin. You can refer them. You will find in Josh Bersin's sites. We started with e-learning, with blended learning. Then we moved into talent management, continuous learning, digital learning. We are at a phase where we are saying learning at the flow of work. So essentially, it's like this. So in one of the designs that I've been part of, we don't load learners with a lot of information about what they need to do and how they need to work. We just give them small nuggets to introduce them to work. As they work, we give them information. And now in the last year, with chatbots coming in and chatbots coming in multiple languages, we have capability in 110 dialects and 28 languages. So with chatbot, with that kind of a capacity, we can address the lowest bottom of the pyramid to the most egalitarian kind of a crowd. We can address all of them, and content is sliced diced into multiple layers, and hence it helps people consume only how much they want to consume at whatever time. So technology has been actually a huge um, uh, help to L&D. Now the question here is, as L&D developed, did the trainers and the L&D fraternity move? My observation, I could be wrong here, only early L&D adopters have uh, moved into building their capability to handle uh, a technology based learning. Otherwise, I see most of the conversations still go around on the fact that do you have content for time management, stress management, how do you manage people? Those conversations are still happening, but I'm just saying that early adopters have moved, and there is a huge opportunity for the rest of the people to move in and build the next generation L&D. To just give you a view of LMS and LXP, LMS was the first to come in with technology, but largely it was training delivery, what training manager would do: identify trainings, create calendars, publish the calendar, follow it up, and ensure delivery happens, and then feedback of the program. Typically, LMS does that. However, this is more precise than what human could do. This can give you inputs of how many minutes did he view the content. Was now with proctoring capability, which means the video camera also captures the eye of the participants to ensure that he's not switching on the e-learning and going away, coming back once it is finished. So he has to be reading it, observes his eyes, and proctoring happens. So LMS is a way of tracking all the information about all the content going there. Has the participant seen it, read it, gone through it, and has he taken the assessment? And with proctoring, I think we are completely locked there. However, LXP platforms has capability of facilitating a lot of methods and technologies, which means you have micro learning concepts, nuggets, micro blogs, user based, user build content, community based content. So this is where LMS will work. Delivery methodologies, post technology, everything is there. It is all depend on the learner to pick up whatever, however, how much, at what time, to cognitively understand, and now go back to applying it in whichever form, whichever way, and work around and build its capability. Now, learning management system is more of a push, not more of a push. It's a push. Content is there. I'm going to validate. Did you go through it or not? Still not a great thing for behavioral programs. Might be for process programs. It is required, as in adherence to safety, posh trainings, and all those things. LMS still can work. And now there is a merging of LMS and LXP capabilities, which essentially means LMS also can curate content and sort of make it easier for the learner to experience content in a different way. Sorry. However, I think LXP are built differently, which essentially keeps the learner. Smita, is there anything for me?
Nothing from my side. I just wanted to ask if you can give us an example of LXP and how it works, a specific thing, something that because you've been working on this.
Yeah.
So a specific example which will be easier for us to understand the basic difference that you have been highlighting. No?
Okay, let me put it from the learner's point of view.
Okay.
So I am going through a LMS. My name is nominated. I get a communication from the LND or my line manager that I am nominated for this program, and I can see it on web, I can see it on phone, I can see it on my any device. I go through the content. The content can be interactive. Again, there are 4 different layers in e-learning. I don't want to make it complex. Once I finish the content, assessment comes up. I finished assessment. I'm ready to be evaluated by the system and the business and line manager if I have really learned. So this is the learner's experience in a LMS. And from the administrative side of the LMS, I think Smita or somebody is on unmuted. You need to mute. Vinay Shankar, I think you need to mute, please. So the experience from the administrator would be, I identify a person who needs a particular program which is on my database. I assign him the program. I follow him on going through the program. If he's not going through the program, I'm going to send him reminders, and I'm going to tell him, please finish the program. It is required for you to finish. Reminders, and once he finishes, I publish the data. So on daily basis also, we can get data as an administrator. We can publish it to the business saying that I have published this many programs for this many people, and X number of people have attended. And this is the action I'm taking for the next set of people to come in, either by communication from the L&D perspective or using the business team to push up the numbers. So that's the work. Now, I'm just, because I'm giving you a very large view, I'm not going to get into the parts and pieces of how it works, how it does not work, challenges. But largely LMS is a push content. The learner is still being driven by content and the L&D and the business. However, in LXP, so let me look at the LXP experience. As a learner, I'm saying now, I get into the LXP platform. I see that these are the skills required for my role. I pick up, I rate myself, then my boss rates me. I know where I stand. I know where I have to go. Point A and point B of my skill requirement is mapped. So then I start reading some of the information, and from the L&D team or business, I'm going to get some content that's built internally or curated content. Then machine learning takes over or artificial AI takes over and keeps sending me curated content of that topic in the way that is relevant for me. For example, I'm just saying as an example, I might like videos, so I'll get only videos regarding that content. Somebody likes reading, only blogs or write-ups will come. And as I keep doing it, reviews would happen in with my line manager. If I'm ready, I can go for a 360-degree evaluation of my skill improvement, and I get data. That's on the learner side. On the administrative side, it's much more easier for me to list programs that is built internally in the organization and curate a lot of content, because the content curation also is now happening based on AI. So it's now much more easier. So administrating LXP is much more easier. However, it is a strategic way of handling LXP. LMS is an executional way of handling it. So you would see, yeah, you would see the difference of the capability of the person who's going to execute the LMS LXP in the last slide. So I'll explain it a little late.
Okay. I think Sangram has added to what you have said. There's a question from Mallap Raju.
Yeah.
He says in an earlier slide, it was mentioned that technology will impact instructional design. Can you elaborate it? In an earlier slide, it was mentioned that technology will impact our instructional design. Can you elaborate it?
I'll do that. When we created content in 2006, essentially we would go through a simple mechanism of individual learner requirement followed by performance requirement, then the performance requirement and business requirement. Then identify what trainings can actually impact all these aspects. If it's not impacting, we say by training we cannot impact any of this, and we'll recommend by training these are the factors that will impact. And once business confirms, we will build content or interventions which essentially starts from knowledge sharing to practice to performance. So the whole thing would be a journey which could take about 3 months for the TNA, TNI and the approach note and the content. Delivery would happen after 3 months for the next 9 months. Correction could happen in between. However, now with technology, I'm not going there to do a TNA, TNI as in sense of LXP. Let's look at it. I have a role defined by the company. The competencies are defined. I evaluate myself, self-evaluation followed by my manager's evaluation. And if there is any psychometric test that can map to this, psychometric test gives me feedback, and I'm good to go start my learning journey. Individual learning journey leads to performance of the team. I get that validated by the line manager over a period of 2 months, 3 months. And I know I have built my capability. Now, if you look at these two components, content there was developed and the learner was very, very far away. Now, the content is not at the center, learner is the center, content gets curated. So that's one way that technology has impacted. But however, there are multiple other ways that technology has impacted ID. I could take a separate conversation with, I forgot his name, separately. You can reach out to me and we can have the conversation. Yeah. And I think I am at 45 minutes and I'm going to move forward. I'll take the questions.
There's one more question, but once you finish, we will get to them.
Yeah. So COVID, is it a bane or boon? You'll have to see it. Now I've taken you through the journey. Realize that here, if you look at it in 2020, we are at a stage where learning can happen in the flow of work, which essentially means, suppose I'm a sales person in a retail industry. I am trying to converse with a person, converse with the customer, I'm not able to figure out what's the right thing. All I have to do is go there, look at the content is ready, whether it is a product, it is a process, it's a behavior, everything is there for me, readily available. I could quickly grasp and go back and handle the customer. So today technology is giving that capability. If the L&D and the business work together, we can create. I just gave an example of a retail salesperson, but it can happen in many areas. I have really have worked on plans for organizations where transportation is at the core. This involves driver who are at the bottom of the pyramid, low education or IQ, largely in sense of cognitive. I'm saying, I'm not underestimating their capability. With all that, I think we were able to. We wanted to use chatbots to help them perform. So we are there in that sense. Technology is ready. So my point here is COVID-19 is a boon for us for sure. It has crunched 2-3 years of the business and others who will take time to say we can go technologically. Today, everybody, whether they like it or not, they're getting into technology. And there's so much happening on technology, whether it is relevant, it is making the learners perform, it's irrelevant, but the business is right now ready. That's the biggest or the happiest situation for me to be in. Today, we are waking up in 2022 while we are in still 2020. So that's a big thing for us. However, are we ready for the morphed roles that we will have to work is a question. So essentially, this is how I view it. This could go through a lot of corrections. I'm okay to listen to people and redesign this. But however, this is how I see it. Learning strategy will become very critical with LXP kind of a stuff, with or the LMS with LXP kind of a capability. There are only 4 ways that performance will be built. Individual learners performance. Individually, I think I want to perform. The second one, there is a skill gap. I'm going to build a skill gap. The third one is, as a team, performance is low, so the team manager or the business or the department head or the manager for that department believes that these are the capabilities needs to be built. So that is one. And the fourth one is by business says these are essential for my employees to exhibit to my external customers, internal customers, or to my stakeholders outside in the supply chain or internally. So these are the 4 ways that you can build. So learning strategies to build journeys are very critical. Aligning of L&D to business outcomes, very critical. This has been being asked for the last 15-20 years. We didn't have a way. Today we have a way. Integrate technologies. When I say technologies, platforms, we have different availability, community learning, distributed content created by. So all that technology we need to be aware of and map it with learning technologies to essentially benefit the learner. That's L&D strategy. Content management. There is so the question that somebody asked, if ID is being impacted. ID is impacting a big time because you're not going through the process of defining like in a design document, you would define what is objective, what is the way that, or rather in instructional design, we start off with what is the outcomes that you want. Then based on the outcomes, you create the assessments. Based on the assessment, you create what are the content that you're going to do, and then say, this is the objectives I'm going to cover in the business. So that is the process that you use in ID. Those are not going to be relevant anymore, because you will curate content, you will collate content. Communitize is largely you bring in people who speak how. For example, if you take a difficult process, somebody has gone through and say how difficult or easy was for you. Whatever he says is going to be very important and uh, crucial for any other person to observe and learn. This is more of observing, and pure learning would happen. So this is my definition. There are most of the things I've picked up from Josh Person and reference. Some of the components are which I frame. C5 is my method of how do you create content for digital learning. You collate, create, customize, communitize, and so the other part of managing communities, created content, peer review, blogs, all this will be content managing. Individual skill development, there will be a set of people who will work on individual skill development, and there will be a set of people who will integrate the individual capabilities built and align it with the business outcomes. So those four segments is what I clearly see as the way forward. So I'll answer why training and L&D. Training largely was cognitive, L&D was largely psychomotor, performance coaching, and affective learning. So there is nothing going to be like training and L&D going forward. It's just helping learners perform. And the word right now that is being used is learning design, which is what I'm using. There is a research paper that's being presented to ATT across, not across, in USA by a team, and they're creating process like ID for learning design. So the whole entire story that I've told you is about building performance based from ID, instructional design, to learning design. So I'm good to take questions, and over to you, the participants.
Thank you so much, Shekhar. There are a few questions. First question is from Pradeep Kumar. He says, content preparation and training delivery, what is the ratio you suggest for budding trainers, and how does one develop skills without copying somebody? How do you develop skills of content preparation and effective delivery by your own without being a copycat, is what he's asking.
Sure. So when I started training in 2006, I was a trainer in the front end. I was passionate. I used to train 24, 26 days in a month. I'm traveling. So I would not be at home. I'd be outside, but that's passion coming out. Keeping that aside, at that point of time, I thought content making is 25%, delivery is 50%, post learning is 55%. Sorry, 25%. That's 25, 50, 25. Content, delivery, and post learning requirements. But as I went through different methodologies, from just classroom to facilitation to discovery learning to simulation, outbound, and all those aspects, I realized content is about 30-40%, delivery is about 30-40%, and the post training is about 30-40%. I guess there is a model now that is being created called 30-40-30. I think that also says similar to this: pre-training, during training, and post-training.
Is there any name for that model, or is it just called 30-40-30?
When I Google up, I look at.
Okay. No problem.
That's how I remember. Yeah.
No problem. Okay. So next question. Shekhar, meanwhile, can you please go to the next slide where your contact details are there, so that people can make a note of it while you answer the questions? Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Smita. So that's
okay. I'm going to the next question.
Yeah,
okay.
Please.
So the next question is by Galaxy J7. I don't know who this is.
No problem.
Up to you. Could you elaborate the vital role of a trainer in this shifting scenario?
So initially I start off with learner and co-creation of learning is applied science. It's not just applied science of one. So you need science of instructional design, you need science of delivery, you need science of learning. When I say learning, how does the brain work, the physiology of brain and how brain functions, and then you have technology and how technology functions. I don't know what are your interests. So look at, there are actually 6-7 components in building up the future evolving roles that emerges. But the 4 that I can off the hand tell you are this: technology, psychology of learning, instructional design, and delivery methods. So if you look at it and give yourself scores, then you have a fair indication of what is the direction you could take. If you are really good at cognitively identifying, visualizing a lot of scenarios and saying this is how one should learn, then you could go into designing content, e-learning content, or curating content. However, if your score is high on delivery, I think you should go on performance management of individuals and so on and so forth. So essentially, you'll have to look at these 4 components and see where you want to map. And this is also evolving. And I have just put it as a based on my experience, I'm putting it. It is going to definitely evolve.
Okay, thanks, Shekhar. So the next question from Lenovo Tab is, for a instructional designer who is comfortable with LMS, what do they need to do to learn how to move into LXP tools now? And also, I don't know if the next question, if you can combine both, is the ADDIE model still relevant in the current scenario you're detailing? So I think they may go hand in hand. So I've read out both the questions to you.
Okay, I'll address the first question, ADDIE model, and then go to how do I shift from LMS to LXP.
Yes.
ADDIE model is grounded in, and I would say it is a truth. So there is nothing that is going to change out of ADDIE model. ADDIE model as it has changed in the period in the 1980s and 1990s, from ADDIE model to simple agile model, SAM. Essentially, you don't go the waterfall model in building content. You go the agile model in building content, but the ADDIE model still remains the same. When you're collating content, ADDIE model still is relevant. Without ADDIE as a background or the backbone, actually it's a backbone. If you don't look at the backbone, you're not going to do any of the C5s. Having addressed that part of ADDIE model, the LMS is more of highly PPT converted into e-learning. Of course, in e-learning, you are just doing a very basic one, or you're creating simulation, or you're creating interactivity, or you're creating a completely story-based simulation, and level 4 you can do. But if you have expertise and you're there, the change that you'll have to look for is, it's not how I'm going to give the content. It's how somebody is going to read the content, break it up into smaller components, and then give them the send the content with the context. So only thing that might change here is you give the content and create the context in LMS. In LXP, you will give the context first and then set up content. So whatever content I read or go through, I know what is the content it is giving for. Just to give an example, you can show a video of Chuck Day and say how teamwork is important. That is LMS style. If it is LXP, you will say why teams have to be working together, and then ask them to look at the video. So they look at the video and they know why it is there. So it's a reverse of the approach is from the learner side.
Okay, thanks, Shekhar. Shekhar, there's a question from N. Ram. So yeah. I will ask him to, I'm not able to understand his question. So if you can unmute yourself and just ask that question to Shekhar directly.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So one thing, there are 4 changes that you said are the emerging things for trainers in this new era.
Mm-hmm.
So I could understand it is technology and instructional design and delivery method, and then one more I missed out.
Okay, recall is very bad for me. In the flow, I remember.
I know, I could understand.
Instructional design, learning design, learning delivery.
It's
learning,
okay.
No. Psychology of learning.
That's what I felt. It's very important.
So there is a huge change in the way that we realize our learning is going to happen.
Okay.
Neocortex plays at the center of everything. And people believe that at the age of 40, 45, we are going down on the capability building. No, all this has been changing in the last 20 years. And we are as good, when I say we, people post 40s are as good as building their neural networks as a 20-year-old. So those are some belief changing theories that have come. So I'm saying we have to be onboarded on those technologies to be able to visualize the Millennium learners. So when you're collating, for example, you should know how much of collating. So do I collate for millennials? Do I collate for the people in the 1960s, 70s, and you throw both the content there in the system. So whoever wants, they'll pick up both. I mean, whichever they want and whenever they want. Yeah.
Okay. Shekhar, we are at,
Another,
we are at
so one
7.
more, madam, one more.
Ram, just there's a last question. We are already at 7. So
Okay,
I'll just
okay.
share
So,
that question, and I'm sure Shekhar will answer yours also.
yeah, it's already done actually. I've written it there.
Okay. Any specific websites, Shekhar, that you could suggest which are good to learn more about today's topic? So while answering Ram's last question, after that maybe you can, because we are at the end and we need to close the session. So this
Sure.
is the last question. Yeah.
Sure. So Ram, you can ask the question.
No, just no. I just wanted to ask. The so-called ADDIE has become padding, they say. Planning is added to that, and maintenance is the last one. Is that true? And is that a new to ADDIE or?
No, see, whenever people talk about content and delivery, I bring them back to cooking. Cooking and what we live our lives are as simple as anything, and that's where all these models come from. So if you want to cook some new dish, what you're going to do, you're going to look at why you're creating. It's for the taste bud, for you, for your family, so on and so forth. You understand that. Then you look at what do you need to build it, to cook it. So you bring that together and see if you really can do it. You put that together and test it, pilot it, and follow it up. So at each stage you get feedback and you start making the dish better and better. That's ADDIE model, as simple as that. And see, I mean, for the sake of marketing and to make a model look attractive, I can do a lot of things. I could have done a lot of models and I can sell those, but that's not the idea. But ADDIE is the backbone. That's a core. I mean, there is nothing beyond ADDIE actually. You can, all you can do is simple agile. So when we say agile, at every stage you are taking feedback. You're not doing the complete content and asking for feedback. So ADDIE will stay. And for the question
website, Shekhar, like somebody asked, would you recommend some websites or something that we can build on to understand and read more about whatever you have shared with us today?
No, that's
close.
That's a very nice question. As I'm going out to sort of facilitate or coach people to morph into new roles, I am building my website, and it should be ready in a month's time. And you follow me, I'm going to throw up all the new things that is happening. However, because you've asked and I don't want to let you down, few of my inspirational people are Will Thalmer, who has written, who has a fantastic model for ensuring performance happens. So if in the learning at the flow of work is another one. So you could look at this too. The 30-40-30 model is one. Flat Army is one. So all this you can Google up. They're available free of cost.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much, Shekhar. I will take this from Shekhar and just put up these in the groups also, so that we can, follow whatever he has said. And Shekhar, thank you so much. I'm sure you've answered everybody's questions, and it was really a deep session, so much needed for, the push for us to think and, plan on how we would go forward in situations like this. Thank you so much. And really looking forward to taking all this learning. Thanks.
Sure, Smita.
A small request. Can I talk to you?
We are at the end of the session. Shekhar has given his details. Please connect with him one-on-one.
No, it is a request to you actually.
Okay, me. Okay.
Yeah. See, it's yesterday I could not log in because I think
all the recordings will be shared shortly. Okay, we are uploading it in our YouTube channel. So we'll share it in all the groups shortly, so you will get all the recordings.
Okay. Very kind.
Okay.
Very kind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shekhar. Thank you for the wonderful session. It's great to have you here. Thank you
so much,
and
thank all the participants.
everyone. Yes, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.